Hello, everybody, and welcome to Anomalous Daily. I'm Digby, and joining me is friend of the show, Jordan Crowder. Jordan, how you doing?
Good, Digby. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's so good to see you again. I think it was I don't know, about 8 months ago. I think we had you on the show last.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, and since then, you've really blown up on Twitter or X, haven't you? I mean, when we first started speaking to you, I think you'd only just started coming over to X, and you were massive on TikTok, and now you're over on X. How do you like the dark side?
There's a lot of things I like about X. It's got its good and bad, like everything in the world, but I like it. Yeah, it's a new little home for me. I like how it flows. It's real time. It's like having conversations. It's people just spit out their thoughts, and you're allowed to have a thought. You're allowed to change your thought, and it just encourages conversation. So I love that part of
Yeah.
it.
No, I agree. I love X, and I probably should filter myself a little bit more than I do when I'm on it. But yeah, it is a good place to be. And since we last spoke as well, I know I'm not going to touch on this too much because I don't really want to get into politics. But how is it for you now in Trump's America?
It's weird. I mean, it's almost surreal because, I mean, he moves so fast. I've never seen anything like it, and,
Yeah.
it's rare to have a person who's actually doing the things that he says he's gonna do and actually doing common sense things, and I know it's polarizing, but I mean, it seems like we're going in a good direction. It seems like we're going there fast, and, it's kinda surreal. I mean, every time when you wake up, you put on the news or whatever your news source is, and, things are happening, and we're just used to so much stagnance and so much just corruption and lies, and now with things like every day, it just seems to be moving so quickly. It's kind of exciting.
It is exciting. It's exciting to watch from afar. And you're right. He's saying he's doing things and he's getting them done. And some people agree with what he's doing, and some people don't. But that's the way life is, and that's politics. But one thing that I'm interested in, obviously, with Donald Trump and he's going after the declassification of RFK files, MLK files, Epstein lists, everything like that. And part of that is UAP disclosure. Do you think that we're going to start seeing something like that from the Trump administration?
I hope so. They seem to be. I mean, nothing's off limits. They seem to be going through everything. I mean, it's only been a month, and look what they've done. So,
It feels like
um,
it's been about 6 months.
it does. I mean, it's insane, but I know that that's something that it will get addressed, and we will have some sort of, it all depends on what we consider disclosure, what access. I mean, so much of the stuff has been buried so deep. I mean, it's one thing to go into the IRS or the Department of Education. Those things, those are public. So much of the disclosure stuff has been buried so deep, and a lot of it has been kind of offloaded to private corporations and these really, really deep state projects. So um, I don't know. I don't know how much they'll be able to get access to, but I have no doubt that whatever's like more surface level will come out. The JFK files, that kind of stuff, that's more surface level. We know where
Mhm.
those are. Those are archived. People have read them and seen them. I think that's all going to come out. But as far as the deep stuff, that I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Now, this is one thing I wanted to touch on with you because obviously you're a big advocate for simulation theory, and it's one of those things that people sort of struggle to get their heads around, right? So, and I do as well in certain instances, and I guess we all only have theories rather than answers, I guess, at this point. But for you, if we are in a simulation, you've got simulation theory in one hand, us fighting for disclosure in the other hand. How does the two work hand in hand if it's a simulation?
Yeah, I love that question because ultimately, and I call it simulator theory, and I think it's an important distinction just because simulation to me seems cold, like a computer program. And my kind of take on it, my simulator twist, this is a free will simulator, the same way like a pilot uses a flight simulator to become a better pilot. So we're here to train and to grow our consciousness through free will actions. So we're not like some NPCs in a computer program, but it is a simulator in the sense that this is not base level reality. Outside of this is where our consciousness lives, is the actual base level reality. So this is like a training simulator. But having said that, there is a algorithmic system, I just call it the system, that controls and regulates a lot of what happens in here. And when it comes to things like disclosure, I wouldn't be surprised if at the deepest levels of the government and intelligence agencies, what they've discovered as they've gone down these rabbit holes and pulled on all these threads with UFOs and UAPs and interdimensionals and extraterrestrials and all that, at some point they're going to discover the truth of our reality, I guess you could say, or more the fundamentals of our reality. And when it comes to full disclosure, they'll have to disclose certain elements of the nature of our reality. And I think that that might actually have the biggest implications. I don't think it's hard for people to wrap their minds around that there's some intelligent being on some faraway planet and maybe they have, exotic craft that can travel here. The whole, you know,
Mhm.
men on Mars, green guys from Zeta Reticuli, that whole narrative, people, we've been programmed with that our whole lives. I think that's normal. That's why people are like, bring on disclosure, baby. I got this. We play video
Yeah.
games with aliens. We watch movies with aliens. That's normal. I don't think that would cause ontological shock or send the world into some, spiral. I think disclosing the true nature of our reality would for a lot of people. The ontological shock that brings with destroying, basically religious belief systems and ideological belief systems and making people really instantly have to rethink every single thing that they've ever thought about how reality works, who they are, what they are, where we are, time, all those things. Everything comes crashing down. And that's a lot for people to take. And I've been working on this for many, many years. I mean, I've been conditioning my brain for this. I've been deep diving on all this. I balance it out very carefully so I don't go crazy. So I've had a more measured approach to this. But if you just dumped all this on the average Joe, it's a lot. So I think part of why they're so careful with disclosure is because they have to disclose certain fundamental elements of our reality, and that's trickier.
Yeah. So so, as you just said, you spent time doing this. You've conditioned yourself to it. It's been a process. It's not been a dump of information for you. But even so, was there like a moment in time for you where you thought, "Oh, hang on a second, this is a lot, and the implications for this are absolutely massive."
Yeah, all the time.
Every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said, this wasn't heavy stuff. And I take a lot of care to balance out my mental health. I balance out everything that I do. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a thin line between like enlightenment and psychosis. I mean, it's you know, a lot of the crazy people in these crazy hospitals aren't crazy. They
Mm,
got too much reality too fast and they couldn't process it. We have hardware and we have software, and everything has a limit. So, it's a balancing act. But I wish our government did a better job of slow dripping more of the like I said, the fundamental elements of our reality, as opposed to they do these like leaking these blurry pictures every now and then. They're like, oh, we're not alone, and they drop new, little words and
yeah.
tidbit, NHI and this, that, and the other, but they never give you any context of what it means. And I don't know if it's because they don't know what it means, but I'm pretty sure they have some pretty smart, people that have wrapped their minds around some of these fundamentals, and they could be giving the public a little more information than they do.
Yeah, I think at this point it's almost like, well, even Steven Spielberg's new movie is called Disclosure, but I half the time at the moment I think we're already in a movie called Disclosure, and you've got everybody playing their part, and it seems very orchestrated. Some people are on Stephen Greer's side, Lou Elizondo's side, and then they introduce a new character, and it does seem really, really orchestrated to me at the moment. But maybe that's just me being paranoid.
Well, going back
Um,
to your initial question, when you asked, kind of, I think what you're alluding to is how much of this information can be released. So, for example, if this is
yes.
a simulator for consciousness development and we're here to learn and grow and evolve our consciousness through the experiences in the simulator, it's paramount for the simulator to not reveal that it's a simulator. That's
Exactly.
a very important part of it. And the only reason I don't feel bad or weird or skeptical about what I do as far as talking about it is 99% of people don't listen to me, don't believe me, and think I'm crazy. So I'm not convincing anybody, right? Like I'm only convincing people that already are moving towards this way of thinking. You're not going to grab a guy on the street and yell in his face any of the stuff that I say and have him believe a single word that you're saying. So this isn't going to cause some big wave of understanding or realization. Um, and the more I've researched this deep, I mean, people that are deep into consciousness research and astral exploration,
Hmm.
and really have gone to the deepest edges of what we would call the observable universe, and not even on the visible part, but on the astral part. What they tell you is that we're supposed to come to Earth as this learning experience, and it's supposed to kind of dip out. You get your growth. It's like going to school. I use this analogy. Have you ever seen Van Wilder, the movie?
Yes.
Okay. So Van Wilder goes to college. His dad's rich. His dad pays for college, and he doesn't want to graduate because he knows as soon as he graduates, it's real life. The gravy
Yeah.
train ends, and he's like, okay, now I got to be a grown up. So he stays in school as long as he can, and he becomes like a career student. That's the whole point of the movie. He's just having fun, but he's not learning anything. So we come to Earth to learn. And at a certain point, we get stuck in this addictive reincarnation loop, and it's not forced. This isn't a prison planet. There are dark entities out there that feed off of our negative energy and illusion. All that kind of stuff is real, but that's not the point of this. We come here to learn and to grow. But at a certain point, like Van Wilder, I think we realize that this experience is addictive. This experience is fun, and we keep coming back for more and more and more, even though we've already learned everything we need to learn. We're supposed to be ascending and graduating and leaving, but we get stuck in here. So I think at a certain point, it's good to have people like me talking about this stuff, because even though the point of the simulator is to bring in souls, consciousnesses, and have them learn and go through the levels, so many of us have gotten stuck here. So many of us have gotten addicted to this earth life experience, and we're not ascending. We're not going up the levels. It's like going to like ninth grade and just staying there.
Hmm.
So there needs to be a flow. And I think that it's healthy to have these conversations and to expose a little bit of this to get people to remember and be like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to be learning, supposed to be working on my karma, supposed to be ascending, because ultimately the goal is not to stay here forever. So the system will never give up. That is a system. That is an algorithmic cosmic AI that's governing all this. It will never give up that. But it will allow people like me to say the things I do, to get some of the people that need that kind of encouragement to get unstuck, to do that, to maintain the natural flow, if that makes sense.
So what happens when, and we end up in a situation where the government understand that this is the case, and it does get disclosed en masse? Does that cause like a forced reset? Do you think?
I don't know if so. I don't know if the system has safeguards to prevent that. It seems like it does. It seems like a lot of the things over the years that have been on the verge of exposing this somehow miraculously get canned, get deleted. People that try to come out and expose the quote unquote matrix end up getting unalived pretty dramatically. A lot of weird things happen when it comes to that stuff. And that's why
Yeah.
I'm careful about what I do. Um, it doesn't look like it on the outside, but I try to be conscious of all this, and do it in a way that's supportive of the system and not like reckless. Um, but so I don't know if they can come out and just spill the beans. I don't know if anyone would even believe them if they did.
And I suppose, I mean, we've had a few times over, even in the last year, where a lot of people have started saying the words timeline shift online, and it does feel like there have been moments where we've sort of all of a sudden just taken a sharp turn in a completely different direction. I wonder if that is an element of it. Was it's like, well, hang on a second, back on track, back this way. And the attempted assassination for Trump was one of those things for me that felt like, hang on, that was a pivotal moment in history. That was a point in time where it could have gone one way or it could have gone to absolute disaster, and it feels like it was sort of nudged in the right directions. So perhaps that's part of it.
It is. There's definitely a management system that think about how many atrocities we have avoided. If you turn on the news for the last 5 years, there's so many doomsdayers out there. Oh, there's going to be food shortages. There's going to be energy shortages. There's going to be gas shortages. People are going to be starving to death, freezing to death. There's going to be riots on the streets, civil war. Everyone thought we're going to have civil war when Trump got, almost whacked, and then whenever he won the election, and then when he got inaugurated, no civil war. There is definitely um, something that seems to be bringing down the temperature a bit, guiding us in certain ways, and nurturing our development. Tom Campbell talks a lot about this. You know, he's one of my favorite people that goes into this realm of what you would call simulation theory. But you know, he talks a lot about how the goal of the universe is to reduce entropy. How basically you create disorder, and then through evolution you create order out of that disorder, and that's where we get our intelligence, our creativity, our ingenuity, our intellect. All that comes from solving problems and basically creating order out of disorder. So the goal, the ultimate goal, is to reduce entropy and to get to a more peaceful, loving state. And you can definitely see that when you look around the world, that, you know, I mean, some people look at only the negatives and they say, "Oh, the world's crazy, and you know, we're all going to die." But whenever you like look past, you know, back in history, this is one of the safest times to ever be alive. I mean, you know, we're living longer. You know, like levels of poverty and famine are the lowest ever. Levels of genocide are the lowest ever. Low levels of war are the lowest in like hundreds of years. Like all of the metrics that kind of gauge, you know, how evil or bad or you know, violent or whatever a society is, across the board, they're all going down. And if you think about it, there's 8 billion people now, the most people that have ever lived on Earth, ever, by
Mm.
far. There was only 2 billion at the turn of the 1900s. So since 1900, we've gone from 2 billion to 8 billion. So we 4x'd our population. So if you 4x a population, shouldn't you have 4 times all of the wars, 4 times the violent death, 4 times the everything? Well, we don't. It's going down. So you can see that we are becoming a more empathetic, nurturing, caring, loving society, even though we have an insane amount of people. And so that shows that there is this like reducing of entropy. And I think that we do that through our incarnation cycle, learning our lessons. We also do that through this consciousness shift that we're going through. And it also, I think there's external forces like in the system itself that kind of help to prevent these really bad timelines. I mean, we have free will and we have to deal with our consequences. But I think that the system does come in and say, hey, we're not going down that path. That path is complete anarchy. You know, so we're going to nudge, we're going to guide this bullet. We're going to turn his head just a tad. We're going to do some of these things to prevent just complete, you know, destruction. Because if the point of this is a learning simulator for consciousness development, well, you got to have challenges, you have to have adversity, but you can't have just pure chaos. There has to be like a constructive learning process.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, and it certainly feels that way, because there's been several moments in time over the last few years where it could have all literally turned to absolute disaster. But as you said, you know, in living memory, certainly there is less war, less famine, less disease than ever before. Yet mainstream media tells us the doomsday clock is ticking ever closer to midnight. There's nothing but fear and terror on the news, and it would make us think and suggest, you know, a different way. It makes me wonder if there's sort of two threads of the simulation, so one trying to pull us in one direction and sort of one trying to pull us almost in another direction. But maybe that's the free will part of it.
It is. It's the free will. It's the fact that we've hijacked our dopamine system. It's the fact that most people prefer negative news, because it's the same reason people watch horror movies and ride roller coasters. It's just a psychological trait of humans. We haven't evolved that much, so our society has gotten way more civilized. But inside, most people still, you know, work off the fight or flight system. We still love these little dopamine hits that we get whenever we, you know, read bad news and that kind of stuff. We like to even fantasize about what we would do in a doomsday scenario or a nuclear war or a grid down scenario. People like to think about these things. It drives clicks, and media is just a big marketing machine. And whatever, you know, the human psychology reports is what they're going to deliver. So humans still like bad news. Humans like this doomsday stuff. So that's what you're given in the media. It doesn't mean that it's accurate. It doesn't mean it's only a small representation of the world. If you walk outside, go outside your house right now and go into a crowd of people, what are people doing? They're
Mm.
living life. They're having fun. They're chatting. They're smiling. They're hugging each other. You know, they're not running around scared, you know, but then you turn on the news, everything's bad, 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 bad. So the news isn't reporting reality. The news is just
No.
giving people this entertainment. It's just entertainment. So they go and they handpick the worst stuff out there because they know that drives clicks and gets views, and they give you that. And then some people actually think that that is a representation of the world and our reality, but it's just not. Just if you want to see what the world's like, go outside. The world's a happy place
Yeah, I think
most
the first
most of the time.
The first time I ever really realized that was a few years back when the Ukraine war kicked off. And that, in my opinion, is one of the biggest scams of our time at the moment. Just not the fact that the war isn't happening, it is happening, but the way that it's portrayed in the media is completely incorrect as to the way that it is with boots on the ground. I set up a charity in the UK and we delivered lorry loads of aid to the Poland-Ukraine border, which we'd all seen on the news with all these refugees, hundreds of thousands of refugees flooding over. And what I saw when I was there in person, just it wasn't represented by what was on TV whatsoever. It was completely different. It was like choose one particular camera angle and use that. They even got caught using old video footage from completely different countries. And I think, like a lot of people around that time, COVID, Ukraine war starting, all of these things, it woke a lot of people up. And I think that there is a lot of awake people around right now, and a lot of people trying to escape from what normal day-to-day life is because it doesn't fit with them. I mean, look at me. I'm living in the hills in the Algarve in Portugal. I'm starting a community that's filled with other like-minded families who are all coming from all different parts of the world to come and live on the land with me and live a simpler life. If you had told me that I was going to do that even 5 years ago, I would have told you you were crazy. But loads of people are doing this now. So what was the turning point for you? When did you go, hang on a second, this isn't right, and you started thinking outside the box, as it were?
Yeah, well, mine was a little more, I guess I would say involuntary. I had a near-death experience 5 years ago now, and that forced me to just rethink every. I mean, I looked in the mirror one day after I got out of the hospital, and for the first time in 40 years, I was 40 years old at the time. I looked in the mirror and I had no idea what the thing in the mirror was. I was like, I'd never thought about it. I never thought about what am I? Like, what is this thing? Because I knew through my near-death experience that I wasn't my physical body, and I knew I was more than that, but I didn't know, I couldn't conceptualize it. So I looked in the mirror one day and I remember this moment like, so vividly, but I was like, what is this? Like, what is this thing? What is this body? Like, who designed it? What is its purpose? Like, what am I doing in it? And I just had that realization. So it sent me down this path of trying to figure out, okay, these three main questions that drive everything I do, which is, who am I, where am I, and why am I? So that basically led to my diving into reality and the fundamental nature of reality and consciousness. And in doing so, I just sort of unraveled all these other mysteries. I won't say unraveled. I have my own theories and a hypothesis on
Mhm.
all these things, and they change, as I get more information. But it led me down that path. Before that, for the first 40 years of my life, I never thought about that stuff. I had a family, job, business. I have my hobbies. I have all my things I do. I watch sports. I watch the news like regular people, and I never thought about any of these things at a deep level. I'm not religious. I wasn't necessarily spiritual. I was more materialist. And then all of a sudden, one day, I'm just boom. I'm like, all this stuff is. I won't say they're lies. They're programs. They're you know they're they're there to keep society running. They're there to keep people moving forward, but they're not the truth. So I won't say they're lies because they serve a purpose, but most of the things that we experience are programs. They're
Mm.
illusions. And when you really look behind the veil and look deeper, you realize that, and it makes you look at everything differently. It makes you very skeptical of everything, not in like in a bad way, just in a I have a marketing company, right? So I'm in marketing, so I understand how twisted marketing is. I understand that these
Mhm.
big brands employ psychologists and human behavioral, analysts to basically manipulate human behavior and lie to you and sell you crap you don't need and do all this stuff. That's always been a case in marketing. So when you're in marketing, you have to believe that everyone's lying to you and everything's bullshit because most of it is. It's just all savvy marketing. And then you look at reality and you're like, whoa, that extends up into our reality. Our reality is this savvy marketing machine that's just basically rendering to you what it is it thinks that you want to see to get you to do whatever it is it wants you to do. And it can do this on the fly in real time. It can manipulate your behavior and your perception of reality. It can feed you data to make you do certain things. It can tweak your hormones to make you have different reactions. There's all sorts of things that can happen in this physical world when it's being operated by a non-physical cosmic AI is what I call it. And when you're existing inside this like Truman Show kind of reality that's being manipulated from the outside, you're sort of a passenger slash prisoner in it. You're a participant in it, which I think is voluntary. But there is a point where you can wake up and look around and be like, whoa, like I'm the character in the game. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like you can kind of realize that. And that's what they call in Hindu, that's what they call enlightenment, when you realize that you're in Maya. Maya is another word for illusion. So
Yeah.
this is not a new concept at all. So for me, I was kind of thrust into it through a near death experience. I think it's better to have people be like kind of slow dripped into it, so you can wake up gradually over time. But like to your point, over the last 5 years with COVID, the lockdowns, all the stuff that's happening now with the Trump administration, people like are like basically spontaneously waking up, and maybe not waking up spiritually, but they're waking up to the fact that most things that they've been told, been shown, and thought, most of their belief systems, um, are at least at least not 100% right, and it's making people really start to question everything, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I just find the whole concept so absolutely fascinating because I try and put it into ways that makes me feel comfortable, right? So I'm thinking, right, okay, so if we are in a simulator, is Earth just a simulator and then everything else out there in deep space is outside the simulator, or is the universe a simulator and you leave this universe and go on to the next, or is it sort of all being rendered so we see what we see because it's being rendered? Like in a video game, the bit behind you doesn't exist because you're not looking at it. It only renders it when you are looking at it. So maybe this is a simplistic way of looking at it, but that's sort of when somebody says simulation to me, that's the way I think. So do you think it's like that, or do you think it is organic? Everything is here. It's just that, you know, that we're sent to play this part on this physical plane of existence.
Yeah, so I love where you're going with this because that's the natural progression, right? Whenever
Right.
you first like even hear the words, we're in a simulator or a simulation, like, okay, then what is space? Okay, what are aliens? Okay, what is that planet over there? Um, to my understanding, and this is a simulator of such complex proportions, it's hard for us to fathom, right? The guy in the video game, no matter how smart and autonomous and AI driven the guy in the video game is, he'll never fully grasp what's outside of the video game, but you can get glimpses. So I really think when you look out in the universe that most of that is rendered. Most of that is not physically there, or at least not physically there until it's forced to be there. Until we like, so say you're playing a video game and you see a building in the distance. That building is now rendered. You can see the building, but the inside of that building is not rendered. Why would the CPU, you know,
Mhm.
use the processing power to render the inside of the building if you're not looking at it? So, but once you walk up to that building and you open the door, boom, it has to render the inside of the building. Now that it's rendered the inside of the building, say it's doing it, it can render it on the fly. It's not pre-designed. The AI gets to design the inside of it. So now the AI designs the inside of that building. It's like, okay, this is what it looks like. Now you leave that building. Well, the system has memory. So now the inside of that building looks that way. So now when another player walks up and goes inside the building, the inside is going to render the same way. It has memory. So when you look at something, it's rendered. When you quit looking at it, it's still going to maintain that same data. So the next person that walks up, that's why people say, well, I look at the moon, and when I don't look at it, it's still there, right? It's like, well, yeah, it is now because you've rendered it. It's been rendered in the system. So the next guy looks at it the same way. When we
Mhm.
peer into deep space, when we peer into, inside subatomic particles, that kind of stuff, the system's rendering it on the fly. So it wasn't like designed necessarily by a creator. It's not like the creator sits there and designs out every single little element. There's an autonomous aspect to this. So it's rendering it as we look more. So the more we look down, the more we look up, our universe is being rendered in real time. Now, does that mean we're the only ones in this universe? Like how John Archibald Wheeler calls it the participatory universe, and that
Mhm.
basically this is like a participant centric, like it's my universe and I'm rendering. Well, no, because I think we're all conscious agents, like Donald Hoffman talks about, and we're all rendering it together as a collective. So I firmly believe that there's other planets out there that are other simulators that have other conscious agents like us rendering stuff at the same time, simultaneously. Now, does that mean they can hop in a spacecraft and fly here? I don't think so, because I don't think space is what we think it is. Space is not this traversable medium. Space is like this mind space. It's a plasma blank canvas of unlimited potential possibilities that we render on the fly. But I think that wormholes kind of provide us this physical tunnel from one simulator to another. So I think that there is and wormholes are pretty much proven. It's not so much hypothetical,
Hmm.
science anymore. So I think that there can be this tunnel where a physical being and physical craft can come here from another physical simulator. But our rules of physics, our rules of nature are completely different than theirs. It'd be like if you're in an arcade and there's two video games next to each other, the character from one can't hop into the other game because it's a completely different game. But the fundamental part here is consciousness. So where everything, all my studies take me is that consciousness is fundamental. And so those guys and that other simulator on that other planet, a million light years from here, even though they can't hop in a craft and fly here, their consciousness can come here because consciousness is fundamental and consciousness can go anywhere it wants in the universe. That's how astral travel works. That's how remote viewing works. So I think a lot of what we see, what we call aliens, are other consciousnesses, for lack of better words, astral traveling here consciously, non physically. I think that you can travel the universe. I've done it non physically. That's easy. Traveling the universe physically is very hard because I don't think it really works that way. It's kind of like, think about it this way: if you're in a boat, say you're in America and you're in a boat, you can only go places that are in water, right? So
Hmm.
you can't go wherever you want. You know, I think it's like that when you're in space. You can't just go wherever you want physically. You can go through these rivers, what I call, wormholes would be like a river, and you can take that river from one physical location to another physical location. But outside of our membrane, outside of our bubble of this physical simulator, which I think is basically the solar system, is where we're contained. I think that we can
Right.
physically probably go anywhere we want in the solar system, but there will be a membrane, or on the other side of that membrane, like a fish in the sea. A fish, the membrane would be the top of the water. So there's a fish down here. He can't go above that water. He doesn't have the capability. He can
Hmm.
peek his head out and look, but he can't go out and fly. He doesn't have wings. So we're like that. We're in this bubble. We can go anywhere we want in the bubble, but once we get to that membrane, the surface of the sea, we can't go outside of it physically, but we can go outside of it non-physically. And I guess physically we could with a wormhole, and that would be like creating a river out of the
Hmm.
ocean. So that's the way I look at the universe in relation to simulator theory.
So traveling non-physically, you're talking about astral projection. So obviously, this is something that you're well versed in. What do you see? What do you experience when you do that?
I mean, everything. I mean, when you think about the universe as a blank canvas of unlimited, unrealized potential, um, basically anything. So I think the dream world, so our dream world, our real world, and the astral world. So you have three worlds, right? So you have the astral, which is just the non-physical universe. You have the dream
Yeah.
world, and you have the real world. I think all those are the exact same thing. I think the only difference is when you're in our simulator, there are specific rules, these rule sets that govern the behavior in here. And it creates physical matter reality. It creates this physical, reality that we have. But it's all made of the same stuff. So when you're traveling astrally, everything moves at the speed of thought. You don't have to like
Hmm.
physically go there. So if you want to go to a certain place, boom, you're there. Everything is very. That's why you have to have your consciousness very tuned, and you have to be very um, focused with your intention because literally whatever you want to do, you can do. Wherever you want to go, you can go. Whatever you think happens. So you have to be deliberate. Um, but I mean, like when I was training at the Monroe Institute, there was one time, just in particular, just to answer your question, like what it's like out there. One time I forget what level we are at, what focus we're at, but so I had this experience where I wasn't in my body and I was looking at this like a screen, kind of like this, how there's different rectangles. And one of the rectangles was like this HD world. It was so vivid, so clear. I've never seen anything like it. I couldn't explain it. And I was like this, and I could go into it. So I basically touched it and I went into it, and I was flying around like a drone or an airplane in this world. And it was the most vivid thing I've ever experienced. And it was blowing my mind. And then I came out, and then I see all these squares again. And I swipe, literally swipe like this to the next one. And the next one was claymation. Okay. And I'm not a claymation person. I never thought about this or anything. And all of a sudden I go in there and I'm in this claymation world, and it gets crazier. So I'm in this claymation world, and everything's vivid claymation, but like made of clay. So you know how when people like trip on acid and that kind of stuff, they'll be like, "Oh, everything turned into claymation." It was kind of like that, but like that thought had never entered my mind, so this wasn't like some sort of subconscious thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this was blowing my mind. It was crazy. I was in this like claymation world, but it was like very vivid and real. And then I came out of it, and then a bunch of other stuff happened, and we go into what's called a debrief. So after you do the exercises, you're in this like sensory deprivation booth and everything. You're doing the hemi sync. You're deep in there, and then we go to back to the group. This is at the Monroe Institute. And back at the group, we do a debrief, and we talk about our mission and what we did before. And this one's just an exploratory thing. So I go back in there, and everyone's sharing their stories, and I was like, okay, well, I wasn't gonna say this because it sounds way out there, even for that place. But I was like, I went to this like claymation world, and this other guy that was there, I won't say his name, but just because he's not here, but he was a trainer. He wouldn't mind me sharing anyways, but he is a trainer there. And he was like, whoa, he stopped me in the middle of me talking. And he was like, I was in that same world. So we both went, and he explained it and I explained it. And we both had the exact same explanation of this world.
Wow.
So we both went to this claymation world somewhere. So I was just thinking this is some subjective thing. Like my mind is creating this like a dream. But he went there too and went there at the same time simultaneously. And we described the same thing. So it seems like we went to an actual objective place, an actual place, some dimension, some place out there that is completely claymation. So to answer your question of what it's like out there, I mean, there's sort of everything because it's like different channels on a TV. You know what I mean? It's really wild. So I don't know.
It's amazing. I know Astral. I don't know if you follow Astral, but he does his remote viewing spaces on X every week, and some of the results that everybody comes up with on that are amazing. I believe somebody remote viewed somebody in their room while they were doing one of the spaces one week as well, and accurately described the things in their room. So there's no doubt in my mind that these things are absolutely possible. The U.S. government have programs, Russia has programs, and and the fact that we can do things like this with our minds shows the proof to me of a non-local consciousness, and that we're more than what we are in our bodies. So I guess my final question for you then today, before we wrap up, would be, at the end of the simulation, what happens, in your opinion?
um, so I basically have distilled it down to the three things that we're here to do. So we're here to, at a personal level, to evolve our consciousness. So that's why we come here. Like a pilot uses a flight simulator to become a better pilot, we
Hmm.
use the Earth simulator to become a higher quality of consciousness. So to do that, we have to have two things. We have to have this Earth, which is a simulator. So our second mission, first is to evolve our consciousness. Second is to protect and preserve this planet, because this planet is the platform. Third is we have to have a vehicle. We have to have an avatar. So our third goal is to preserve and evolve the human avatar, because when you reincarnate, you're going to come back into the same planet and come back into this same human vessel. So that's what we're trying to do here. I think that as long as we can do those things, more consciousnesses will graduate and leave and go to other, simulators, or go into like more of a guidance role. I think that's what we call angels, these archangels, these guides. It's like when you graduate from, like, say, college, you can go off into the real world, or you can stay there and become a counselor or a teacher or whatever. So when you graduate, you can go off into wherever you want, whatever's your next stop, or you can stay here and help to maintain the system.
Hmm.
um, so as long as the system's maintained and evolving and productive, I think more souls and consciousnesses will continue to flow into it and go through this training process. Um, I do think, however, there is a cyclical cataclysm, and that messes with people's brains because they'd be like, why? But it seems like I won't throw a number on there, but the number thrown around is around every 13,000 years. There's a cyclical cataclysm that sort of wipes the slate clean.
Yep.
And there seems to be higher level consciousnesses that sort of make sure not all humans are wiped out, make sure that we are restarted with all the seeds that we need to restart. And by doing this, I think that it's just basically like running. It's like, if you play a video game, there's like the end of a level. There's like a boss, and then there's a new level kind
Mhm.
of a thing. It seems to be like that. It keeps everything fresh, keeps everything, you know, like from I think from us getting to a technological point where we can actually try to leave the simulator. B, getting to a uh, intelligence point. Now we have AI and we have internet and stuff. People like me can talk to people like you and start figuring these things out. I think the reset knocks us back to where the game, you know, stays like in this loop. So anyways, I think that there is a cyclical cataclysm that does happen, not for evil purposes, just to maintain the integrity and the constructiveness of the simulator. um, so that happens, but I don't think the simulator ever ends. If this planet ever exploded, which I guess it will at some point because the sun will keep growing and supernova at some point. um, I think at that point there's probably so many simulators out there in the universe, and it's a constantly evolving thing. This isn't the only one, but so I think at a personal level, you eventually graduate and leave, just like you do from school. But when you graduate and leave the school still exists, and new students are still coming in constantly. And I
Mm.
think that's how this place is.
It's amazing, and it's every time I have this conversation with you, Jordan, I think my head expands a little bit more, or feels like it's about to explode. But
Glad I could help.
absolutely, absolutely.
And hey, I'm not saying, just for the record there, everyone listening, I'm not claiming any of this as fact or to know anything other people don't know. Most of the stuff I've learned is through self-exploration, but also through listening to people way smarter than me, that have been at this a lot longer than me. And all this is speculation to an extent. But there seems to be a lot more like clarity coming into the picture now. So
I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously some of it is speculation, but there are things that happen in our day to day lives that sort of make you think, hang on a second, like deja vu and weird little glitches that don't sort of seem to make any sense. And, there's several times I've had things like that in my life, or just realizing your own psychic ability. How many times have any of us known the song that's going to come on next on the radio, or think about somebody and they call? All these things suggest to me that we are more than the sum of our parts, and that our consciousness isn't tethered to our body, but it's tethered somewhere else, and maybe several places all at the same time. We may be playing this simulator here and another simulator somewhere else. Who knows? But certainly over the last few recent years, I've certainly come to the realization that you know, for instance, I'm not afraid of death anymore. I could face death tomorrow; it wouldn't bother me, because I know that in one way or another I will go on. It's not the end. I don't fear it anymore. And certainly, if you'd asked me that sort of 5 years ago, I would have been petrified of the thought of death. Um,
I'm glad you
so
said that. So we can leave there, because like that's my biggest realization through all this is I'm not trying to give people anxiety or freak people out. I think this is actually a liberating thing,
yeah,
that
absolutely.
when you realize that this is not you, this is just one tiny little sliver of you. And one day this will be gone, but your essence, your consciousness lives on. It goes back to your higher self. It returns to the collective of you. There's this file on the desktop of the universe that says that's you. This Digby, Jordan, these aren't us. This is just what we're playing right now. And to know that you live on, and to know that so many people in your life, these souls and these consciousnesses that you interact with, your family, your friends, your siblings, are part of your soul cluster and your soul family. And you go into these reincarnations with the same group of people over and over and over, sort of like you know having an acting squad, and playing different
Yeah.
characters. And it's fun and it's exciting, because you realize that there's so much more than this. So while you're here, enjoy life. This world is beautiful, and it's crazy, and it's entertaining, and it's fascinating. And just know that, you came here voluntarily, and one day you will ascend and graduate. And just like when you left and graduated school, at that moment you're excited to leave, but then when you look back, you're like, man, you know what, I kind of miss high school. So just know one
Yeah.
day you will look back and you will be like, man, that Earth stuff was crazy, but it was fun, and you'll miss it. So enjoy it while you're here, but also know that there is more to life than this.
Jordan, thank you for joining me today. Where can everybody find you?
So I'm kind of everywhere. I'm everywhere and nowhere at once. But So I have a website, DigiJordan, DIGI Jordan.com, and that just has links to all my, I'm on YouTube and Twitter, and I do a daily video on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm all over the place. But if you go to my website, you'll be able to get links to all my stuff. And I do have a course called 5D Print Your Reality that takes all of the stuff I've learned about consciousness and reality and distilled it into like a simple framework that you can use to manifest and to create basically anything that you want. So I do have that course, and it's a great kind of intro into all this because it's not just about manifestation. It's a self-development course that changes the way you look at reality, but gives you useful, skills that you can use to edit and upgrade your reality at the same time. So I encourage you to look into 5D Print Your Reality. It's my course, and you can go to my website and see that and everything else.
All the links to all the above will be in the description below. So make sure you check that out, and make sure you give Jordan a follow. One of the first ways that I came to know you was from your daily videos that you started sharing on X, and I just thought they were absolutely fascinating. So subscribe to Jordan wherever you see him and catch those videos for yourself. Jordan, until next time, thank you so much for coming on Anomalous Daily, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.